So good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Dietrich. I'd like to welcome you to a discussion in more detail about the capabilities of the EOSC platform. Some of this will be a repeat. Some of the slides will be a repeat from what Klaus Werenga presented yesterday. In fact, you're looking at, I'm listed Mark Dietrich, but I'm actually your third choice for leading this. Diego wasn't able to come and Klaus had to go, and so I will try to do my best with this content, but I hope you will participate. I hope you will ask questions, and I look forward to the discussion. We'll try to walk through a pretty complicated subject in a coherent fashion, and we have some great presentations to dive into some specific topics. But I'll give an introduction, which, how many of you were in the session yesterday about the minimum viable EOSC? Okay, so, and Tobias here was even giving a presentation there, so I hope he was paying attention. But I think we will cover a little bit of that in slightly different emphasis, so I hope it won't be too much of a repetition. So again, the three key tenets are that the EOSC Future is intending to realize and deliver an actual functioning version of the EOSC Core and EOSC Exchange, as was contemplated by the minimum viable EOSC preparatory report. And a key aspect there is that there should be interoperable data and resources. We want to integrate those data, those resources from the science cluster communities into the platform. So that's our objective, to make that possible. So quite a lot of work has been done to make that achievable. And necessarily, because we're involving these science clusters and communities, we have been acting and engaging in a co-design process with them to make sure that their needs are at least partially reflected. We recognize that not every wish was granted, but our objective is to create a platform that can be extensible and can get to the promised land, if you will, in terms of the needs of each and every community that we're working with. So again, we started with a bit of an abstract concept. When we began the project, we had a lot of functioning components, but what we did not have was a holistic picture. So we've been working hard to build that holistic picture and to build the actual integrated system that picture describes. So as part of that, we're doing quite a lot of work to actually write down, actually document the exact ways that we're doing this. It's unfortunately a bit of the development standard of you build it and then you design it, but clearly we're turning that around. So a few, I call these thwack value slides. You can actually you should be able to access these slides at some point from the symposium directly. These are the outputs of our architectural modeling effort, and the point here is that there is an awful lot going on. This component view shows the different parts. The black pieces are major pieces of functionality that the EOSC Future team has been in different work packages developing or extending from existing capabilities and then working to bring together. So a challenge is simply creating that interoperation even within the platform. Let's see if I can use this. The stuff this is the exchange in the diagram. This is the core. This is the consumer, and this is the exchange with existing infrastructures that have been in the world already. So we didn't build those things. That's why these things are gray. The things we built are here, or integrated are here, and the process we're describing is how to bring them into the exchange, we use the word onboarding, and Matt will be talking about that a little bit later. So it's kind of an absorption or an assimilation process by which these outside resources can be made part of EOSC, can be made eligible and interoperable with some of the EOSC capabilities, and hopefully better interoperable with other resources across the whole platform. So again, a repeat of the discussion. The core is in production. We have a resource catalog, which is the first implementation of the EOSC exchange. We have a federation model to interoperate not only amongst our components, but also amongst the various data and service capabilities that are spread across the capability, the core plus the platform plus the exchange. And then we're bringing in the outside resources, the resources from the communities into EOSC, not to put them in a different place, but to allow them to join into the benefits of this federated model. So it is open for business. As Klaas mentioned yesterday, there is an integrated catalog of services, data sets, other research products. These are supported by an advanced AI search engine to improve the ability to find resources across an increasingly large list of possibilities, give capabilities to access and order those services, to download research products, and actually to compose them or build them into projects that would incorporate different particular pieces. So this allows each user to customize their EOSC experience, to bring in and identify or tag the pieces that they are most interested in so that they can work with them quite readily in the EOSC environment. This includes a number of integrations. I won't list them, but we will be talking about them a bit over the course of the different presentations. And finally, again, this EOSC exchange capability is further and further enriched over time as the outside clusters and research and infrastructures begin to work with the EOSC platform and bring their research products and their services into the platform. You can browse by research activity. This is a change in the model. So our user interface model, we've done quite a lot of work to align the user experience with the kind of the user's own mental model about how they do their work. So we've changed categories, we've changed the way things are presented in the user interface so that this is more intuitive for the researcher and it makes it easier for them to find the resources they need. Roxana will talk more about this in a bit. We have an integrated catalog of the different pieces that includes, as you can see here, if I can do this, we have publications, data, software, services, data sources, which are collections of data and publications. And we will also be having a training capability. We don't have that today, but we will be incorporating the training resources. Oh, I've lost my banner. See, that was my opportunity to hide. When people start throwing tomatoes. Yeah. So the point of more than 3 million resources, that point was made yesterday. That's true. We do have millions of resources that are available in the catalog today. So a small number of them are services, but millions of them are research products. So we do have, at this stage, a little bit of shall we say, multi-stage user experience, which we are figuring out how to improve. But right now, you can come into, if I can get my pointer to work, there's a service interface. You can find a service or a data set in the main interface, and if you click on a service, it'll take you to the marketplace where you're actually allowed to access the resource. Or if it's a data set, you can click on it and it will take you to the Explore interface, which will give you more information about that particular research product. So these two views are differentiated depending on whether it's a service or it's a research product. We're looking at ways to integrate that right now, so it's not entirely the way we would like it, but the capability is there and the different respective capabilities exist for the respective resources. There's a catalog onboarding process to allow catalogs to come into the EOSC community and then to in turn expose their resources to the EOSC community directly, or alternatively they can pull EOSC resources in from the EOSC catalog into their own catalog, so it's bi-directional. And the data source onboarding process essentially works. I think it's been discussed in several venues where the catalogs or what we call data sources or collections of resource products are identified. They're assumed to conform to a number of specific guidelines, specific sets of interfaces that will in turn make their contents discoverable and then bring those into the total research product catalog and make them visible to the EOSC user. And what that means is that the EOSC user doesn't have to go to each of the different data sources in order to find those resources. So it's intended to provide a seamless experience. Finally, there are a number of integrations that improve, augment, enhance the services that may be offered by particular service providers. We have a generic help desk capability. I say generic not because it's the simplest thing we can think of, but instead to say it has a range of integrations from full integration to very simple integrations, but the point is it can serve the needs of many different communities in a consistent way. So you can have a subtenant version of help desk that might be just for your community if you want to use the EOSC version of this, or if you have an existing full-featured help desk system with your own giant knowledge base and your huge set of resource, support personnel, then we can tap into that and make it a seamless experience for the EOSC user. So we don't have to change that. You can just hook into that through the help desk. The same point applies to monitoring, applies to order management, or applies to accounting. And I'll talk about AI in a minute, but basically the point is we provide multiple ways for existing communities to plug in to these very important aspects of functionality. In other words, just providing the service is not enough. You need to be able to give help desk. You need to be able to make sure the service is up and running, that's monitoring. You need to keep track of the use of the service, that's accounting. So all of these functions are necessary, and so we provide some common capabilities across the entire, that can be applied across the entire EOSC portfolio of services through the exchange. AAI is obviously a very fundamental point of integration. In other words, if you come into the EOSC community and you have you've logged in through your own local community AAI, which is fine, but that community AAI is not part of the EOSC AAI Federation, then it becomes difficult for you to travel around in the EOSC universe and to use the different resources. So we're encouraging different community AAIs to federate with the EOSC AAI Federation so that there is that that common seamless access. And the way to achieve that is through the AAI Federation. So there'll be other presentations about that. I don't think we have a presentation about that today, but there are, I think, 3 others going on later today about this. Okay, a little bit coming up quite soon. Certain things that didn't quite get out the door in the last couple of weeks. One is the user dashboard, which provides a much more optimized experience for the researcher. It allows the researcher to manage their own profiles and preferences in terms of the stuff they are interested in, and sort of allows them to customize their experience. We are going to create some ways to bring different pieces together into solutions. I won't, we don't have good words for this, but the idea is that amongst, you shouldn't be confronted by a great big bag of Lego. We want to give you some kits of Lego that allows you to people to build airplanes, other people to build a camper wagon, something like that. Whatever you want to do, there should be solutions to allow you to get going on that quickly. So we are trying to create the Lego kits that will help researchers in different areas. File transfer, a very common requirement, so we'll actually talk a little bit later about this tomorrow morning, about how the file transfer service will work, but this is a fundamental requirement. The data's here, the thing I want to do with it is over there. How do I get it? How do I move it? How do I do this without downloading it to my computer and then re-uploading it this way? So is there a better way? And there is. Accounting for services will be ready in a couple of months. Again, that's accounting for the usage of services. And finally, more richness and more functional capability in our interoperability framework registry, which will be the engine that enables a very great deal of this interoperability across the entire platform. Okay, advertisements. pointer. So, like I said, there's AI implementation this afternoon, onboarding this afternoon, resource composability this afternoon. This is all this afternoon. You can stay here in the nadir, which is the lowest point, as you know, lowest common denominator. Tomorrow morning, same place, same time. No, actually different place, implementing the EOSC interoperability framework, so we'll get more into those details. This is later today. Tomorrow morning, we'll talk about how the execution framework is going to work. And tomorrow afternoon, the service management system, and finally the EOSC portal, what are the values for researchers. So I hope if you have areas that you're hoping to dive into more questions that we don't answer today, there are going to be some sessions to start to answer those questions. So that is the end of my presentation, or it better be. Look at that. So the next step is for me to imagine that I have my glasses on. And it will be the lovely and talented Paolo Monghi to tell us all about discovery.
Discovery Channel.
I feel like Jacques Cousteau.
Did you reload it just by any chance? Because I
opened it from the
okay.
the directory.
Yes, but there's something missing.
If you made changes to that file, they should appear. That's the magic of the internet. It's not there?
It's not there.
That's also the magic of the internet.
No, it's not there. And it's some change.
This is a main folder.
So yesterday, Google at
which one?
This is the folder.
Sharm el Sheikh
so
and
this is where
COP27 was saying, we're going to build a data commons with millions of files.
Can you give me 1 second?
Everyone clap. Thank God for Google. So, well, my usual form of entertainment, if Paolo's...
Mine is changing. It's the same folder.
Yeah, this hasn't, because it's the date of yesterday, so...
So probably this computer is not connected.
Maybe just like...
Is it in the right
I
place?
did. It is in the right place.
Is it in the place that I put it?
Yes.
In EOSC Symposium?
You see, it's not
What's
changing.
happening?
But are we online?
Yes, it's online.
Hello? Check, check.
Okay, so go with the old one. Okay, it's fine.
Yeah, it's online, so I'm not sure where you've edited, but it's just slideshow.
3 seconds to hand puppets.
Yeah. It's a shame they were much better in the new version, but you will see it probably when it will be distributed. So, okay, so findability, it has to do, of course, with discovering things. And this presentation will show you the perspective of findability through the EOSC platform. In this slide, I changed it. I made it a more general problem. So the idea is that we are in the open science context, so discoverability is not finding a research paper, as we are used to do using Google and so on, but going well beyond. So we have a number of first-class citizens here, including services, including data, including software, which are now becoming more and more part of our common understanding when we are publishing and when we are finding and discovering objects. Science is a process where we take data as input, we take software as input, we produce sometimes data and software, we produce an article, and we do this via services. So it's important for us to take this into account when we find and when we publish. And reconstructing this graph has been one of the objectives of OpenAIRE in the past and in the EOSC today. Actually, the combination of OpenAIRE and the activities of EOSC Hub, let's say, converged into what we have today, and we call informally the EOSC Knowledge Graph, where we have a combination of the products that we are usually we are used to produce and publish, together with the services. And the combination of the two gives us a clear picture of the scholarly communication infrastructure. So what you see here is the model, the data model that we have developed and implemented, and the main entities that are being displayed. So there's a general concept of resource. We may have resources of type services. We may have resources of type products. And all these are connected via several other in context, as we'll see, entities. It's important to mention the word in context because we are here to say that in the next stage, at least when it's about finding and discovery, everything that we'll find and we'll want to reuse must be in context, so connected to a number of other entities that can give us more information about the object that we are searching and others that may be related with it. So the example that I wrote here is made up, of course, but gives us an idea of what you can do today thanks to the combination of all these assets. So Mario is a PhD student interested in human interactions. So he's studying how children of various ages collaboratively solve problems and align on their decisions. So he lands on the EOS marketplace and he runs a query. And the query is about alignment, analysis, children. So 3 keywords. So as you can see, bottom left, what he finds is a software. Okay, he finds and discovers a software. He's good with software, so he wants to get into the details of this, and he opens up this page, which is a display page. From the marketplace, it flies to explore, and he finds out that this software has been written by people and blah, blah, the usual stuff that you can find in a splash page. Now, if we dig into the page a little bit more, you will find out that there are linked entities around it. First of all, he can access the source code, and that's pretty straightforward. He can go to Zenodo, where the software was uploaded and eventually downloaded. But he finds out that the project is funded by, the software has been funded by a project that is called Animatas, and it's a European project. And it has 2 related entities. So when he clicks on the related entities, right side of the slide, he finds out that there are 2 products. One is an article, and one is a data set. So in the new version, these slides were fantastic with windows going on, but this is the static version. And plus is wrong, so I'm trying to fix it live. So what he finds out is that the software is supplement of an article. So he can navigate to the article, open the page, and find everything about the article. So everything that we are usually finding. Then he also finds out that the software is a supplement of the data, and the data is a supplement of the article. So they're all connected. The users made an effort when they published to combine these entities together. And this, of course, is tracked within the graph. So it can reconstruct basically this triangle, which is very useful and common because the article will very likely tell him more about the software, more about the data, and understand how these were generated. He also finds out, which is very interesting, that all these objects are funded by the same project as a consequence, of course. This is determined by the production of the graph. Probably what happened is that the article was funded by the project, and that was clearly stated in the acknowledgement. This was text mined, inferred, and linked. And as a consequence of the fact that the article is supplemented by the software and the data, the funding aspect has been transferred to the software and the data. So this magic, allow me the word, makes the whole context of research and finding much more clearer. So still in context, the user is interested. So Mario gets into the funding project, so opens the page and the landing page of the funding project, where he can find many information about it, the partners, the beneficiaries, all this sort of stuff. But inside he also finds publications, research data, and research software that have been published in the context of this project. So he navigates through it, right? And he can check what other kinds of data or other kinds of software have been produced by this project, which is very much related with what he is interested in. Finally, and that's let's say another novelty introduced in the EOSC, you can observe now a glimpse of the interoperability framework as well. So he decides to go for the software. He likes it, so he opens the page of the software, and he also finds out that there's a link that clearly claims check compatible EOS services. By clicking on the link, Mario is forwarded to the marketplace again, where he can find a list of services that are likely compatible with this kind of software. So he can execute the software with that, okay? This is always available if you can rebuild this connection. So if in the graph we are able to claim that a special object is of certain kind, so it's compatible with certain kind of reuse, and if a service is as well compatible with that kind of reuse. In this case, it's a notebook, so just think is the name of this software, is a Jupyter notebook, so the likeliness that the EGI notebook may be useful for that is very high. So we suggest it, we recommend it. So the user can actually open the EGI notebook, find out everything about it, how to order one, how to execute one, and so on. So after the investigation, Carlo is a new guy, so I don't know why, but it's Mario in the beginning, okay? Mario has found software, data, many related information about his investigation, so he's quite happy with it. And he has developed his own experiments and all this stuff. And he has now some software in his hands. And by just looking at the behavior of his colleagues in the Animatas project, he realizes that many of those have published in Zenodo, right? So he decides to do the same. And he decides also to do what the others have done, which is very important. So to link the object that is now published into his own research fields, his own research projects, to link it to the paper that he will hopefully and eventually write, and to the data that he might be producing. So as a result of this, we have a happy user and also an educated user, we hope, because this is the final mission of the EOSC as a whole. So thank you. If you have any questions, I'm here.
You mentioned something that was going to my Okay, my powerful voice was not enough without the microphone. So you mentioned there is a Jupyter notebook, so most probably the AGI, etc. So this most probably is where is the devil, because sometimes software has dependencies, there are libraries, there are things, not everything is a Jupyter notebook. So how are we planning to solve that? Because it can be very frustrating for users when something is supposed to work, they are not necessarily the best IT literate people and can start to hack things in a VM. So how do we do it to ensure that things actually are fully compatible and remain so, because versions of the software change and then results might be different, so it very quickly becomes very complex.
Okay, so whenever you have an objective of this kind, so you're starting from zero and then you have the optimal target, right? So, and when you're in between, you can see the things from 2 points of view. So the half-empty glass or the, the half-full glass, okay? So let's start from the half-full glass in the sense that there was nothing like this before. So this is the first time this is being implemented. And it's based on approximation, as many of the services out there, based on a sort of likelihood of compatibility, which gives the user anyway a very important step ahead, because today is not possible. So today, any user who finds a piece of software, well, he's just found a piece of software, then he has to find out how to reuse it. So we have the tools today to make this connection, this likelihood of connection available, so the user can try. At least they have a starting point, okay? Then if this is done to the point, so if you think that whoever is using EGI notebook in a certain context and publishes it, provides this information of connection, well, that makes it quite straightforward in the end. You can eventually reuse it for good. Then we have, I'm not going through it now, but we have an incremental and agile ways of developing this, which will take us in the end, at the end of the project, to a much better stage. So we are trying to include notions such as configurations, parameters, which are still much in the end of the communities, though. So I'm not going to delve into this because it will take a long time. But we're giving flexible tools to make this possible, adaptable to communities. We can discuss it if you want offline, coffee break. I think there was his first and then Christos, and then I don't know all of your names, but you.
Thanks a lot for the presentation. Very interesting ideas with the catalog and the links and the connection with each other. My question goes in the direction of what is exactly the difference between the catalog and the marketplace, and also with some community have their own catalogs with very specific to their topic. How do you see there the link in the future?
Okay. So, first question. The distinction is the marketplace is really the place where you find all the resources that have been properly onboarded to the EOSC. So they committed to the EOSC interoperability framework. Services that have been onboarded, and for those services that are data sources that have regularly onboarded their products, you will find the products in there. If you want to find these things in context, you need the broader map of the global science. And this is why we have included Explore, right? So we have the marketplace and / exchange in context. Okay, so that's the main thing. For your second question, instead, there is a distinction, right? So those catalogs must exist because they are the ones where users can find in context, but in their own discipline context, data sources. They can also resources, so products, data, software, whatever they have. They search based on their own understanding of science. The EOSC catalog is instead a place where we go one step up in abstraction, and we are trying to put together different catalogs and interconnect them in ways that today are not possible, to find links and the cross links between different catalogs and disciplines. Christos?
So one more question and then we need to move on.
Yes, and then we have 2-3 coffee breaks.
Have more yes. Can later.
Let's hope then that this question will be interesting, you know. Well, this is a very serious example because it is based on a pragmatic situation where Mario is a student and Carlo, whoever, but it doesn't matter. The problem is that he finally finds two of the fundamental elements a student or a researcher should or would like to find, you know, in the EOSC platform. One is the third data. The other is the reproducible analytics, which is the software, and you have documented very well how it is connected. But the third element is the communities. He wants to collaborate with other people who have done this work or similar work. So is it in the scope in the near future for the EOSC platform to cater the communities as well?
Okay, so yeah, Roxana will answer this question. Just one comment is the EOS model, as you've seen it now, is just a starting point. So other entities will come into place, and we are already thinking of other entities. If you come tomorrow morning, we'll discuss some of them. And one of these surely will be, and it's already under discussion with Paul Miller and others, is the notion of infrastructure, the notion of community, the notion, these are delicate points, and probably they need the community to agree on them. But I'm hopeful they will be in as real entities. One can attach his own products, services to somehow. So yes. Thank you. Please take a look at the other version of the slides just to give me a little bit satisfaction.
Hello and welcome. My name is Roxana, and when Paolo was presenting the findability aspect, I was a little bit thinking about what to say about the access aspect in the taking into consideration what has been said about findability. And at the beginning, I had this plan to show you or tell you a little story about how people I've been talking to and developing one of the tools for the EOSC platform, how they recognize their own cycle of delivering science. But the not idea, but example that Paolo has put on the table is very similar to what I wanted to show you here. So I will just skip through it. What I wanted to say, though, in addition to the questions and some remarks that have been said, we need to, at some point, every of us is asking the question, what is EOSC? And for me, the EOSC at the beginning was about the technology. And I tend to forget it about open science as principle. But the technology is the mean to make open science better, more collaborative, and in the end, the assumption is that open science in general incentivizes and makes the science more efficient. And as a next thing, we need to also remember that the complexity of many connections in the environment we are trying to build here is enormous. And when I talk in my origin country, in Poland, with scientists, the regular scientists who are not involved in the European project, for them, the complexity or the range of things we are doing here is unbelievable. I'm not sure if it's the same in your case, but most of the scientists in Poland, they have their own software that was developed by students usually. They have their own computers to run that software. They have their own data Excel files that then they process without any metadata schema. That's the reality. And they very often they don't know, because we are here to deliver what is meant to be delivered. We need to know the general model in the end. But the model cannot be general without knowing all of the use cases, and we don't have them yet. What we know, or what is delivered by now, is based on the use cases we know. And for example, the technology, the portal, the services that Mark has mentioned, they are ready for many features, technologically speaking. But what we need to evolve also is the readiness of the providers and the services being delivered by the providers, because we can have interoperability, but for things to be interoperable, they need to be able to speak to each other. To be able to speak to each other, there of course needs to be some environment, some infrastructure beneath that enables that feature. But the tools, the elements, the resources, they need to be properly labeled in order for the interoperability makes place. So in the beginning, we were starting with the set of services that had their metadata schema, and we were able to explore what is out there based on this metadata. So if we are coming from a scientific community name A or B, if we are interested in service type A or C or D. Now with what Paolo has shown, we are one step further. We are able to connect the things that were used together to give some outcome, and later can be reused for the sake of future outcomes. Sorry, wrong arrow. So coming back to Paolo's, or maybe I will just quickly tell you about this. So we have also worked a lot about understanding what user typology the EOSC can support in the beginning. Who might be in fact the person who is coming to us. And right now we think that there are single users. And what I'm saying here is very in the scope of the access part, because finding things is the first step. Then being able to access them and use them, exploit them, is the next thing. And the use, even though we are talking about the open access environment, is still not the same, or it's not unified when it comes to the access part. And in the scope of the access, we figured it might change in the future, that there is a single user, community researcher, but the community itself, it's the user type. The business user, the private companies here, representation of a project, because project is also a potential user of the EOSC. And once we have an idea, we need to be able to understand what will be needed, or try to guess what might be needed among the things I know of. What might I need? Maybe I need some analytic tool, but I know that I have a big set of data, so some additional computing might be handy, some storage, etc. Once I have the idea in point number 2, then I start to look for them, and that was Paolo's. And then I need to check if I can in fact start using them. Start using them together in a consistent environment is yet another step forward. And also Paolo has shown, and we are also slowly getting there, that it's for some of the use cases feasible because we know the constraints, so we are able to implement the use cases. And for example, Paolo choosing this example that now I'm following up on, we have different kinds of things that are in the basket of this Mario student. So we have the data, pretty straightforward. We have the software that is eligible to consume that data. We have the service, but in the previous part of this slide, it was better called because it was called executable framework or environment, and I will get to that why in a second. And the last one is also a service. And to get lay your hands on it, will have different things you will have to do. For data in software published in a spirit of open science, all you need to do is download it. And EOSC Explorer is allowing us to get to the source of these entities and just download it on your computer. If, however, you have the executable infrastructure you want to use it with, or you want to consume this software with the use of the infrastructure, you will have to move it, and that's the data transfer capability Mark was referring to. It's not here, but it will be added soon, hopefully, on a regular basis. And again, this is a coincidence, but not entirely, because yes, just think alignment analysis is a kind of software that is a Jupyter notebook, and the Jupyter notebook being one of the most common notebook among researchers we were collaborating with, was integrated into an executable infrastructure consisting of computing and storage, able to process larger sets of data. So yes, we are not there yet into the full interoperability, so we cannot just find and explore any software and run it in the EGI notebook service, no. But the first use case is there. Finding something that is a Jupyter notebook and is by default interoperable with EGI notebook service, the connection is already there, so we are one step closer. And now, for some of the services, again, open access is not always the same, because you can have an open access, something we call fully open access. So it's open for any kind of user. You're just open, you can download or start running the computations, whatever. You don't even have to tell the provider who you are. But in most of the cases, we still want to know our users for different reasons. With some cases, the only thing is needed is being able to authenticate yourself. So tell me who you are, and it's enough for me. For some cases, I didn't put it there, but for some cases, it's a very common case right now also. You need to tell me who you are, but you also need to, someone, the AAI infrastructure in that case, should tell me if you are a user who is coming from a researcher industry, from the research environment, because my way of running things require you to be a researcher. So if the AAI part for the in the scope of the access needs to get this capability soon, and it will as well, to be able to assess the level of the trust of the user. How do we know if this user who is claiming to be that user, how do we trust him? Why do we trust him? Because if we know in the general EOSC AAI that the identity provider providing this information is on the site checking manually these people and verifying the affiliations, so we can trust that person as well. And the last but not least is the access when it comes to, when we are not only asking about authentication, but also authorization. So me as a provider, I want to be able to tell if I want to support your use case, if I want to serve you with the service or another resource. And if so, then only then you'll be able to use that and consume this service. And this is what we tend to name right now order management in the platform. It's not the best, or it's not my favorite name for it, but in general it's about giving the ability to the provider about deciding who can access the service. And there might be many reasons for which providers are deciding in, let's say, this accepting part, this accepting step. There might be a capacity management in place. So maybe you need to be careful with the resources you are offering. So you want to know who is coming, how much of the resources is asked for, and check if in the time range in the form, if you in fact have these resources. And it's two-way advantage really, for both sides, because you can have the provider who's not checking that, claiming that you will get when it comes, for example, for the computing capabilities, that you will get the computing power, but in fact, when the day comes, you will not be able to, because there are other people already waiting. And when you read your SLA, you see that you were just having the level of, what is that, this kind of, not, that you were not promised anything, you are just running on the, help me, Mark. Doesn't matter that you are not
sharing allocation.
There's a more accurate name for it, but sorry, I don't remember it right now. So, but you don't have the reservation of the capacity. You just, if there is a sorry, opportunistic. Thank you, Matthew. Yeah, that's the one. And now, for the sake of supporting this access mechanism or the decision-making based on the access request, we introduced something called the offers. And the service that you have seen here called EGI Notebook, EGI Notebook, when you scroll down, you will see that this service can be ordered in 3 flavors. The first one is meant for the researcher, the second one is meant for communities, and basing on who you are, the provider of this service is giving you different technical parameters, is offering you something slightly different. But there is also a bundle, so this first step towards the composability. In this case, the bundle, or something we call the bundle, maybe we'll call it solutions, but nevertheless, it's about integration of the 2 services that they are able to be create the seamless experience for the user. In this case, it's ability to process, compute, and then share your outcomes with the B2Drop service. And once you're, so when being a provider with the order management or the order management capability at hand, you are able to very precisely say what is available to the user, so the user can make up the mind in the right way and choose what's of interest mostly. And when the user chooses the best option, the best offer, then there is an ability to make it more detailed, and sorry for the, on my screen is okay. But choosing the parameters that the user wants to use when running the service. Once the request has been sent, we have the phase where we are waiting for the answer from the provider. And again, we introduced this concept a long time ago that we want to elaborate on now, called the scientific projects, marketplace project. And this is for the sake of the user in the order management, provider in the order management, because the information gathered in the project are supposed to serve what is the scientific reason to use these resources, so the provider can make a decision if he wants to support this science use case or not. But it's also the place where the user can contact with the provider, and when the user is waiting for the information about if the access has been granted or not. So if access to this new order for this project is granted, the user can start using the service. And the last thing about the projects, as you can see right now, you have like separate bricks here. And right now, it doesn't mean that they can work together. The only thing that can work together are the elements included in the bundle. But the long game here, is that we, in the end, with the use of the interoperability framework, we will be able to tell the user which bricks can create a workflow, like data workflow, data supporting workflow, and which not. And hopefully somewhere in the future we will have a possibility to link almost everything with almost everything, but we all know that it's a long time ahead of us to be able to do that. And I think that, yeah. So if we have the acceptance, there is an execution, and maybe, sorry for that, maybe as a result, we'll have a new element in our catalog that was produced and will be linked to the research objects used and services used to deliver it. So this is all from me about access and execution. Thank you.
So we have time for one question if we...
One.
Please. This is Tobias.
Tobias.
Good morning, and thank you very much for the very interesting presentations, I must say, this week. I have two questions, actually, sorry. The one is who decides on the user access? Because I understand it's free resources. So who decides which kind of package you're being granted? And how do you deal with this if it's being challenged? So do you have, because that means you would need quite a lot of people actually in kind of serving this. Yes. And the second is just for my own understanding, what would I get through the platform and where would I stop it? Let's assume a model. A model consists of data. Okay, the data are free, I could get them. It consists of a code. The code again is free, I could get them. Mm-hmm. Now when you think about running the model, you need the full package, you need interfaces, you may need solvers, and you may need computational power. Well, not only you may, you will need computational power. I guess that's not the part that you could get through the platform, but that's probably something where the platform would be able to enable direct contact to the ones providing the service.
Okay, very good question, thank you. Regarding the decision about granting the access, it's on the providers because in fact, why we called this part of our tool, part of our platform, the marketplace, because in the end we want the market to create itself and sustain itself. So these are the providers who are coming and deciding what is about to be offered on what rules apply to the services or research products at hand. For the most of the research products, or all of them, it's open access. There is no need to ask for anything, but for the services, we have different use cases. Some of the service providers, they want the user to submit an order only for the sake of gathering technical information, how the service should be deployed, and this order is automatically approved in the system. Nevertheless, they want to have the information both on the project, so the science reason, and the user, and the technical parameters, so they do take part in the order management. But again, the decision about granting access, how they do that, if there is automatic or not, it's on them. And the second part, that's exactly, and I will talk a little bit more about it in the next sessions for the user-facing platform, part of the platform and executable framework. But that's the plan around the interoperability framework. We are hoping that with the right metadata models for different technical types of the resources, in the end we will be able to tell and suggest to the user which software based on the technology underneath or which data can be consumed by a given service that is about analysis, for example. Because based on the format, not every service that is about processing and analysis is being able to process a given data set. With the help of interoperability framework, we want to be able to suggest or give a list of compatible services to run the analysis for a given data set. Then you can underpin the computing power. You need to know what's in the computing side to decide if you are able to run this software or not. So that's, again, it's all about the right metadata and the curation of this metadata, because with that, the technology platform is there. It's ready. It can be probably better in terms of the user experience, but it's more or less there, the model implementation of it. But we need the data itself. We need the information about how the bricks fit together.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just a moment for the blind person to find the next presentation where we'll do a little bit of recap of what we just have talked about. And just very specifically, in many cases, the actual interaction with the job that is running on a computer, on a system, you're probably outside of EOSC. You're probably working with the interfaces that are provided by the compute, by ULIC or Lumi. Okay, so we've been trying to talk about the EOSC platform using the 4 letters of FAIR: findability, accessibility, interoperability, reusability. So I'm going to do a little recap of this to put things in perspective. So, and nobody throw any, I hide behind this. EOSC is not the only way to achieve a lot of these things, but our objective is to make EOSC the best way to achieve them. So if EOSC doesn't exist, to some extent, your findability as a researcher is limited to your own community. So this is the universe of things that you know in your community. And what we hope to accomplish with EOSC by making the catalogs interoperability is we expand the range. We increase the range. Yes, you can do that by flitting like a bee from catalog to catalog and looking for the best resources, but we're trying to make that process simple, the findability as simple as possible. And you can see, the scope of the original catalog and just an illustration of what may additionally be acceptable to you. Now, accessibility. Roxana was talking about that. We talked about authentication, authorization, even the usage models, etc. In fact, this reduces what's available to you because not everything is something you can log into. Not everything is something you can get access to. Not everything is something you will have the authorization to use. So some of those resources in that great big wide world are going to be taken away from you, but the ones that are left you can use. So you now have an interesting, rich set of things that can be used. The next question is interoperability, which is what I'm going to talk about. So this is how we figure out the things that work together at a very low level. Okay, so we'll talk about what kinds of interoperability there are, and we talk about potential interoperability as well as actual interoperability, and these are real issues in the real world. What we want is for researchers to connect interoperable resources to get something useful done, to actually achieve usability and to generate a result. And ideally, at the end, we're going to give them a capability to create a new thing, to create a new little dot in our space. So what's involved in doing that? Okay, now we're going to I got lovely pictures. We go to text. It's probably actually too small for you, but at any rate, let's go back to the definition. What is this connecting the dots process, defining interoperability? It's the ability of one or more systems or applications to exchange information and to mutually use the information that has been exchanged. These are ISO definitions. So what does that mean in practice? Well, there are a couple of examples of this that were written up in 2017. So it's kind of useful to look at that because a lot of thinking has gone into this topic already. There are different kinds of interoperability. Some previous discussions have talked about it. Here we use the words from the ISO standard: transport, syntactic, semantic, behavioral policy. The essential point is that interoperability standards alone are not meaningful unless there's a context. Okay, so I could be using XML up the yin-yang. I can be, everything I have, I've got marked with XML, but until I have a context for how I'm putting those things together, until there's some meaning or context, it doesn't make any sense. So a standard alone does not interoperability make. So for our EOSC interoperability guidelines, we're trying to build up a contextualized version of some of these standards discussions. So we have 3 main types. There's core-to-core, which generally nobody in this room, except the people in the front row who work with me in trying to make the core platform worry about. There are core-to-core interoperability standards. We don't write them up as guidelines because it's part of our architecture. There's a next category, which you've heard a lot of talk about, but they work because there's core to exchange interoperability, and that is when you want to connect an exchange service to the core and to make some better thing possible. So a couple of examples of these are onboarding of services or resources to the EOSC exchange. That onboarding process is in fact implementing or acting underneath a guideline around interoperability. The EOSC research product harvesting. So we've talked about being able to get research products, bring them into the EOSC exchange. That harvesting process is actually operating under an interoperability guideline. And I'll mention it, it gives more details in a moment. Another example, integrating with a monitoring service. Their EOSC has a monitoring service. How can it look at some random exchange service out there in the cloud of dots and actually make some sensible statements about whether that service is operating? So, well, there's a guideline for that. So we'll talk about that. And lastly, as an example, and the most interesting and fertile area for us is going to be exchange to exchange interoperability. So not about talking to the core, but letting all the dots that are floating out there that have come from different communities actually talk to one another and become useful to one another, okay? To become interoperable, to actually allow interoperation. So we'll give one example of that, the EOSC data transfer service. So here's one of those pictures. I scared people with that before. All those lines that are different colors. So we've got standards, APIs. We've basically turned on the standards button in our modeling tool, and the different colored lines mean the lines conform to a given standard or use a certain API. So, lots of flavors. We've got, email standards, we've got metadata AAI standards, we've got other kinds of standards for different kinds of things. So that's all, inside baseball. It's stuff you don't necessarily need to know about because it needs to be figured out on the part of the EOSC platform team. When we go outside this internal view and we want to start bringing things into the platform or make it accessible to the platform, we start doing, for example, onboarding to the exchange. And the EOSC profiles is a prime example of an interoperability guideline for how you bring those things in. So the syntactic requirement is the metadata from an EOSC resource must be clearly identified. We have to have the right fields. We need to represent the information with an agreed meaning. We have to agree on controlled values, or what's the kind of business model that we're really talking about. Even questions of like, what is a service and what is a data source? There's some definitional discussions about which profile do you use to put things into the exchange. Very reasonable questions. And then we also, at the end of the day, want to have a predictable outcome that when we do onboard a service, it actually can be found in the catalog. So that's our behavioral expectation. This is why we do it. We want it to be found, and we want it to be usable there. So all the cool stuff that Roxana and Paolo were talking about are turned on. And if the onboarding didn't go right, they don't work. So that's the behavioral implication of getting the onboarding right. So the guidelines are not published, but when they are, there will be different DOIs for each of each type of EOSC resources, and there will be specific interoperability that is required to enable it. So there'll be version-controlled EOSC profile specifications. There'll be a sort of a Git mechanism for that. There will be APIs, controlled vocabularies, etc. So all the moving parts you would expect from a standard would be there. Something that's frankly, a little bit more advanced is the EOSC Research Product Harvesting Guidelines. And here, OpenAir has done a great deal of work on their own version of onboarding. And the point I would make there is their guidelines are published, they are available, they are referenced to DOI, each of them, so you can go look them up on your resolver of choice, and they all rely on the OAI PMH standards for harvesting. So they leverage that capability as a sort of a common standard. It's a standard, but it's something that's built into a contextual guideline to make it make sense. the EOSC monitoring service, relatively new in our tiny little universe or solar system of standards, of guidelines. Here, again, the behavioral outcome we're looking for is that when you comply with this guideline, you actually can have monitoring data from your service collected in a sensible way and then presented as part of a user dashboard, or presented as a dashboard that's accessible by users, or presented in connection with a specific instance of the service, so that people can make sensible decisions about whether they want to use this resource. So that's the purpose. So we want to make sure the data makes sense. We want to make sure the data is correct. We want to make sure it's aligned with the right information. We don't want to present the monitoring data for service X next to the listing for service Y. That would be bad. All of that is enabled by this guideline. There are a lot of moving parts there, and I'm just kind of listing, in a sort of just trying to impress you with how complicated it is, but there are many parts to that, but they all link to their own sets of standards. So it's not a standard, it's a guideline, which is a framework that incorporates a bunch of standards that together allow something to happen. As a third version, a third flavor of this, we have the EOSC Data Transfer Service Interoperability Guideline. Again, a work in progress. It achieves transport interoperability. This would seem very simple, but in fact, we have to do quite a bit of work. Our objective is to connect various source data things in our cloud of dots. We need to figure out which of those dots can be transferred. We then need to identify the transfer system that allows them to be moved, and we need to identify another set of dots that will act as acceptable, eligible destinations when we move the thing. So a storage system. So we need the right kind of dots as inputs, we need the right kind of dots as outputs, we need a compatible system in the middle, and right now we have one, but there might be 3 or 4, we hope there will be, and the guideline will bring those pieces together, and it is the framework in which all these work together to achieve a desired purpose, to fulfill this context. So that's just a few examples of this. So they can work together, they're not mutually exclusive. So we could use the file transfer, the data transfer service guideline to allow for data transfers, and we might enhance that one by looking at the monitoring capability and say, well, do I want to do the data transfer to this storage system because this storage system may not be running. It may not be open for business at this particular moment, so let's not send it a file because it probably won't respond and it will fail. We may want to have all kinds of other things like job execution processes, and that would then poll different things to tell us if a compute job was finished or a file transfer process was finished. I mean, that could be a generic service that's offered through EOSC and can be brought together, composed with some of these other things to achieve nice, useful work. All of the stuff I described will be going into a guideline registry, which is being developed. It is not ready yet. So the expectation is that it will be publicly available. It will link the services, the resources, the research products that are necessary to implement the different guidelines, and it will also act as probably a spur or a motivation to say, hey, you need X or you need Y or you need Z. We'll need to build those things to make this really useful. I just mentioned one, this progress monitoring, the progress bar service might be an interesting thing that could be used with dozens of activities. There's a governance process that's been developed and consulted on that will allow these guidelines to be created and to be walked through a process before they actually show up in the registry. And this is useful not only for these exchange to core activities, but it's really useful for the exchange to exchange examples where the communities can say, we want to have our guideline for interoperability on topic X incorporated into the overall registry. And what's a good example of this? So I'm going back to my dot cloud. I'm inventing a new word. Dot cloud of research assets. Now, many of the communities that we talk about say, look, I don't need EOSC. Well, I would say, you know what? I would like you to put your stuff into EOSC, and I want you to expose and make transparent the interoperability guidelines that you use within your community. Bring your stuff into EOSC, into the EOSC catalog, load them up with these interoperability frameworks so that other people can see that and can navigate your world. They don't have to become an astronomer in order to be able to see the astronomy data or to work with the astronomy data. They can instead see it in EOSC and then begin to draw those connections across the different communities. This proves that it works. In other words, the stuff actually makes the transition from your community to the EOSC catalog, and it's still usable, and it has all the great semantic information that it had before. And now all of a sudden it's exposed to a much wider audience and could potentially be the subject of interdisciplinary research that wasn't really possible before, or at least was very hard because you had to be that bee, bee jumping from bush to bush to figure out what's really going on. We want to make it easier. So this is the sort of the real Valhalla of this whole activity when we start getting this to happen. Exchange to core is interesting. Exchange to exchange is when we really start to hit speed on the racetrack. So that's me. Questions? Matti.
Thank you. Will this registry, interoperability guideline registry, be just for human consumption, or can it be somehow operationalized and formalized as well?
I mentioned on a slide earlier, it's intended to be both.
Sorry.
In other words, we want it to be machine readable so that potentially you can navigate that as you consider different options, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
And now a question. Oh, Tobias.
Thank you. Well, first of all, it's rather impressive and good to see all the many different guidelines. I must admit it's a little bit scary also. So imagine
there will be thousands when we're done.
So imagine I'm a researcher. How long does it take me to go through the guidelines and make my data interoperable? An hour, a day, a week? And the question behind it, there comes a follow-up. So probably if you think about a large research performing organization, would they have then rather one EOSC person who kind of digested and lives all the guidelines and help the researchers? Would this be the model you think about? And what's coming a little bit, going even further, and this links to the previous presentation. Sorry, just how would this be incentivized? Of course, you're incentivized by having more citations, by probably being considered in the next consortium, etc. But would you also incentivize, let's say, this very active contributions to, let's say, kind of these premium accesses? Would you take this into account when you think about the access?
I think I'm a bear of very little brain, so I think I've missed some of your questions. But it will take time. There are going to be many. I think it will be, what I'm hoping is that what I hope, and that this is a hope, is that we would provide a mechanism that would provide a format for different communities to describe how they operate within their community in a common way. So first they argue about it inside, and they're already arguing about it inside. It's happening. So we're giving them a template to fill out and say, oh, once you've finished arguing and you write it up like this, you can put it in the EOSC Interoperability Framework Registry, and it's now visible not just to you people, but to everybody. And then also you can use that when you put all that good stuff in your community into EOSC. Those same external people can look at them and build them. To the third question, I think the creation of these guidelines could be it's one of those actions in the research community that would be rewarded with citations and so on and so forth, and that would be a mechanism for capturing that. So we need to add that to our sort of bibliographic reviewer, editor, gold star handing out process. The one in the middle is what's the incentive to doing it? I think the incentive to doing it is that if you have a problem, if you're working within a community and stuff is not working because you can't talk to one another, then you already have the incentive. If you're working in a cross-disciplinary environment, you have that. You can propose frameworks. We have a governance process to allow the frameworks to be put together maybe on a provisional basis and say, well, I think this is working, let me try it. It's an alpha or a beta, and I'm going to use it in my research and see if it works. So that might be an approach to get to populating that registry.
And I will just add one thing that Mark is forgetting, because he's not a techie. I believe that in the end, what will be done, it's with the use of the right technologies, and as when we develop the model itself, it will just be behind the scene. The user will not know about it. It's like the internet is working right now. Nobody thinks what protocols are used with different scenarios. And I think it's, again, a long time ahead of us, but if we have the model right, if we know enough data about the different use cases, some of the integrations in the scope of interoperability framework can happen automatically by default, without even user being aware what has been created technologically speaking.
I want to clarify one thing, because you asked why researchers should look at the guidelines they want. So the guidelines that you're looking at here are for service providers. So the question that you asked second is important. Why should providers engage? Which are the incentives for them? And here we have a long list that we can roll out. The main thing is that it's the provider and the service that is running, like a repository, an archive, or a service that is actually providing computing, is the way for researchers to produce science and to reach out to some of the services. So if you're running a data archive, or if you're running a software archive, you want everything that is provided by the researchers through that archive to reach out to the world. So for example, the whole EOSC compound is connected to Scopus, is connected to Web of Science, is connected to Google. So every time your researchers will publish in your archive, by connecting to the EOSC, you ensure that this will reach out different communities through different channels. So this is just one of the many. And it's actually the incentives that we play with providers. Do it, and you will have an extra function that you can offer to your service, to your users.
Mark, did you have a question?
Of data, services, or any other resources is achieved within EOS by making use of the exchange, and behind it the resource catalogue that we've been hearing about. So the front end of the exchange is the marketplace, which enables the discoverability of these open science outputs. The link to the marketplace is at the top of this slide, and there are a very large number of resource research outputs that are currently been onboarded from providers to resources to the very large number of objects from the OpenAIRE research graph into the millions. So I'm going to give you now a couple of examples about how we can go about using this marketplace. One example being Earth observation. It's a very generic subject. You stick that into the search bar and it comes up with 12 services related to Earth observation, a data source, 23,000 publications, over 1,500 pieces of software, and 5,600 data sets. Very large number. Of course, we need to know how to use them, and this is when the interoperability framework, the execution framework, which you will hear more about tomorrow morning, comes in to join the dots that you saw from Mark's presentation. Give you another example of atrial fibrillation. So atrial fibrillation is the most common cardiac arrhythmia. It's pretty easy to detect, and it can show some underlying cardiovascular problems that need further investigation. So a little bit more specific, but even so, if you put this into the search bar, then you'll come up with 2,100 publications, 18 pieces of software, and over 700 data sets. And then you can investigate them, bring them together, and do something with these. So it's a very impressive tool. If you haven't checked it out, have a look at it, do some searches to see what is available right now, what has been onboarded. So to say something more about this onboarding, why would we want to onboard? Well, to answer that question, that depends on who you're actually speaking for, which point of view. From the point of view of the service providers, onboarding offers a way to integrate with the core, with the ordering mechanism, the central ordering mechanism, the central EOSC help desk, which which we heard about, the EOSC AEI security, and a plethora of other different functionalities within the EOSC core. It also benefits from visibility to new users. So you may have already your existing user base within your domain. By onboarding, you make your services, your resources visible to potentially a large number of other new users. And it also enables for the composability of other onboarded services, this exchange-to-exchange linking, which, as we've discussed before, is a big problem that we do need to solve now. For the point of view of the users, however, the EOS portal is a single point to discover a large different number of resources, to order and access once you've discovered these resources, and then to compose them. So for more information about what the criteria is for becoming an EOSC provider, we have the high-level rules of participation guidelines from the Rules of Participation EOSC Task Force, but this is very high level. Within the EOSC Future project, we've needed to translate them to some concrete criteria that we apply when we have onboarding requests. We need the onboarder to be a legal entity or to connect with the registration of a hosting legal entity which is already onboarded. Why is this? This shows that there will be some assurance of that resource being maintained into the future. The resources need to be targeted to EOSC or EOSC communities or built on or leverage EOSC capabilities in order to serve some community. So it's got to be related to EOSC and what we're all doing, so we're not into onboarding absolutely anything. It's got to be a mature service, so TRL 7 or above. This is the technology readiness level, which you can Google and find out more information about. Ideally, it would need to be 8. To be orderable, it would need to be 8, but we would accept an advanced TRL 7 as well. So once you've made the decision to onboard, you need to provide some essential information. You need to commit to effective service delivery, and then that's not the end of it. You need to agree to periodically update that data that we have about your service on the resource catalogue describing these resources. So how do we actually do this validation? Well, within the EOSC Future project, we have an EOSC portal onboarding team, which is the EPOT team, which manages and assesses this compliance with the inclusion criteria. I've put the link here, although this inclusion criteria is being updated constantly, and it's run as a collaboration between the Future project and a number of different other EOSC projects. And if you do have any information, there is a link as well. So this is the conceptual idea. How do we do it from step by step? So first of all, if you're a provider, you need to onboard yourself as a provider. That is the very first step. Once you've done that, we validate you as a provider, at which point you can start to actually do the onboarding. First of all, with your first resource, whatever it is, and then that first resource needs to be validated manually by ourselves. Once that has been done, then you are able to onboard further subsequent resources without any explicit validation, although we do have this ongoing auditing process to actually make sure that the information that we have in the catalogue is updated and remains updated into the future. So we started out by onboarding providers, services and resources, but over the last year we've really diversified into onboarding a lot more different things. Data sources, which could include repositories or aggregators of data, registries, etc., to catalogues themselves. So here we're talking about different catalogues. We have this central catalogue, but we also have communities, we have organizations, we have projects who have their own catalogues of resources. Well, clearly, if they want to become part of EOSC, it would be a royal pain for them to onboard every single item within their catalogue. So we offer the possibility of onboarding a whole catalogue in one go. And for this, then we would require the catalogue owner to sign an onboarding agreement which sets out what the expectations are. Data products and other research products from the EOSC, from the OpenAir research graph has now been integrated with the onboarding, as well as training material. This is a new thing that we're starting to onboard, and also guidelines to populate the EOSC interoperability framework, which Mark mentioned in the previous talk. So there is a lot of onboarding going on. In this last slide, I've provided some pointers to further information. I'm also very happy to answer any questions now. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. I'm a humanist scholar, also a TF member, and I have a very concrete question. Are there steps now or discussion to integrate the SHOC marketplace into the EOSC portal? Because it's a very, very good tool for humanist and SS scholars. We are very proud of this SHOC marketplace, so I would like to get it also related to the EOSC portal.
Yeah, so I was actually at the last SHOC conference at the beginning of this year, and I had quite a few discussions about this. My understanding is that that process at that time was almost complete. I don't have any other further updates, but if anybody here knows, then...
I know. So both SHOC and Nordic catalog. Sorry for that. So we were from the beginning, because we were investigating how many communities out there have the catalogs, and when defining the interoperability aspect for the catalogs, we were consulting, and both SHOC and Nordic, you do have your own catalogs, and are now in the testing phase of onboarding the whole catalog. The only one so far is NIFOS, who has onboarded, and SHOC and Nordic are the next ones to onboard.
Thank you, Roxana.
Hi, Matthew. You provide impressive figures, and I just went to the EOSC portal, put Earth observation, and found 134 services. So can you show how you do it to find this big number? Because I cannot, and I'm in EOSC Future, so there is something that is not going well in communication, because I cannot find what you can. So if you could show it.
But what are you looking for?
He mentioned that finding Earth observation, he could find thousands of results.
Resources, yeah.
Look at this. If you go to search.eosc-portal.eu, search.eoscportal.eu.
Not marketplace. Marketplace has only services.
Okay. You'll see most services.
Wrong link in that case, my apologies. So it's search.
Search.
Okay.
I'm guessing that's the problem, but I don't know.
I got the link wrong, because I did do these searches yesterday, and I did get these numbers, I assure you.
Okay, so
Jordi, I will help you later.
I was just using proximity to ask question. My question will be about architecture. Actually, what in context? First day, it was interesting comment from non-computer, non-infrastructure users of EOSC. We are waiting ICT until they solve the problems. Also from Roxana, that the all complexity technical will be hidden by good interface. So what architecture I've seen, it's very correct, but it's architecture of the services, and it's in sense of the whole EOSC, including community. This architecture has a conceptual miss. All platform architecture contains the services layer, and after that, user layer, where the services layer instantiated to the user layer. Actually, users work these services, this infrastructure, through the instant user environment. In this way are built all telecom business, also majority of known marketplace like Amazon, and also cloud providers. So I think this should be a kind of either rethink or redesigned.
So a quick answer is that this is in progress, and Roxana's group is working on exactly this kind of thing through a thing that I mentioned in one of my first slides, which is the user dashboard. which will have that user-focused capability.
Well,
this is not user dashboard.
I think I know what you mean.
It's a technical issue, and if you look at the so-called digital platform architecture by telemanagement forum that was implemented and analyzed in the Giant project, you will find actually example how it is done. And I would say this would be the right approach to solve the problem of bridging between user community and infrastructure, domain operation.
Okay, thanks. Next question.
I don't have a question. It's just an observation coming back to what Jordi was saying. So if he, as a EOSC Future member, is not able to find things that you did, Matt, it means that something is very, very wrong there. And we really have to work.
Just the link is wrong. The functionality is there, but you need to know what the link is. So.
Yeah, but if he doesn't know, but imagine one user who has never seen.
You're absolutely right. Yes, we need to work on this.
I do not entirely agree, because there is a chance that Jordi is using the URLs that the normal user that is not involved in the project would know. Because the user journey right now is enhanced, and probably Jordi knows the exact URLs which are not now exposed that much into the user. And I would say it might be one of the...
I think there is a tiny little problem in the connection between the front page and the search part, and
it should be fixed.
He should know.
It should be fixed.
But it has to be fixed.
Yeah, you're right.
It has to be.
Thanks. Yeah.
So I'm a regular user, and I had this exact issue last week when I tried to look into the marketplace. I found it once with a lot of references, like those huge numbers. I wanted to show it to my colleagues, and I got back to the one you got with almost nothing. Could never find back the one with a lot of things. So there is an issue, and I don't know what it is.
We will look into it.
Go ahead. Okay, thanks. Just maybe a higher level question, but I have all sympathies with this onboarding process, right? You evaluate who can provide their later on some services entry. On the other hand, open science means open, right? Remove barriers, let them go. So like Wikipedia, everybody can enter whatever they want, they can modify. How do you see this with onboarding, which is a lot of work for EOSC, right? You have to evaluate, check. And on the other hand, make it open for everybody, that you just can enter.
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and we've been struggling to get that balance right. The barrier has to be at some point. It cannot be too low, because then so much rubbish will come in and it just becomes something that's no use to anybody, and it can't be too high either. So we've been working a lot on this. Our current acceptance criteria is published. It's kind of working. Luciano is in the audience. You're very much involved in the onboarding process, but
I just want to make an additional point on that, in that if you think of the millions, billions of research assets that are out in the world that are open, their being open doesn't mean that they are well annotated, that they are properly marked with the different kinds of relevant metadata, or that the metadata has been properly applied. So the challenge that EOSC faces is to create a quality capability that does in fact, I wouldn't say guarantee, but can give the user, the EOSC user, confidence that when they see something in EOSC, it does have a fair amount of this additional stuff that makes the asset very usable. So open is sort of a low hurdle, and what we're trying to encourage people is to jump over a few of the higher hurdles, and that's not something EOSC can do. The research, the product owner, the service owner needs to do that work, to annotate their their assets, their products, etc., so that they can be found, they can be reused, etc. So this is not a problem we can solve, but when researchers make that effort, we want to give them a reward for it by incorporating that.
And you are very welcome to the rules of participation discussion that will tackle this problem, because also a quick remark from the person who is dealing with the user interface. I'm one of those who think that we should be strict at the beginning, because we are just trying to implement some new mentality when it comes to open EO. People do not do this by default, so they sometimes don't even know how to. And when we are trying to do well by the users, you need the proper data. Metadata for the resources, for example. And believe me, when starting with services only, when we are trying to make the discovery part at least accurate, it was impossible, because providers didn't know how to fill it in, they didn't have time. We know it's tedious to fill in all of this metadata, but it's for the sake of the user functionalities to work better and in a more automated manner, for the sake of discoverability. So if the user enters something in the system or filters, then the user can be sure that what's the result will be something that he is expecting, or she. So this is connected. Like once it's a standard, then we can be more open, but once it's not, I think we cannot.
Yeah, just to add that openness is not anarchy, is not anonymity as well, and is not zero cost, right? So these are common, unfortunately, common misunderstandings. Of course, making things open has a cost, and somebody has to pay for it. Tracking who's doing what is actually very important for many reasons: assessment, trust, authoritativeness, and so on. And also quality. And quality, of course, requires being strict in many ways, instructions. Actually, the challenge in probably the next 10 years would be to find at the community levels the right alignment and the right procedures and the right rules to make sure that the data can be profitable, reusable, etc. Today we are facing exactly what you're saying. So the long tail of science publishing all sorts of stuff in all possible ways which make them completely unreusable, right? So that's the... So thanks for the question, because actually it opens up again all these topics.
Jordi, there is some...
Hello? Yeah, perfect. So just to add something on what I was saying, when Anka said, I think that it comes to a symptom of the fact that dissemination is not something that we are doing very well within EOSC Future. And the EOSC wants to cover a vast domain that is all research that is done, and we need to go to the universities, to the PhDs, to the postdocs, to everybody. And this is a huge effort. And we are here, I don't know, we're quite a lot of people, but you know, there is a huge community out there, and it's very difficult, and we need to have lots of effort in dissemination. And this has not been built in EOSC Future, and I think that for the future projects and to ensure that the EOSC is a success, this needs to be a core thing that we do. It's very good that we are building lots of services, and they are all not fully mature. It's normal. We are building on them. We are working. We are halfway through EOSC Future. There will be more funding, but dissemination is going to be key. So it's something that I want to say, because we need to focus on that at some point.
If I can may, well, there are certainly many aspects of this business, but the dissemination has a meaning when the platform is in full operation. And we have, you know, the same problem in many research infrastructures. If you go out there and tell the people, you know, we are going, you know, to develop this, they don't get it. They have something, you know, to play with. This is one thing. And another aspect about the openness, we tried in the past to do that. I remember we were in the Vibrant project, and the infrastructure we were building was based on a content management system in the web. We left it open, and we ended up, you know, with porn material, you know, in several cases. So you need to have, you know, a certain level of control, and to be sure that the scientist will have, you know, a reliable array of resources at his disposal.
What we can do, and I think we are trying to do as much as we can, is consult on different levels. Go to the researchers and ask how they understand open science, what they would expect from it, and we try to do that. But
so please.
This isn't. Is it working? Oh, okay. Sorry, this isn't directly relevant to what you've just asked, so please feel free to push it aside if you need to in the interest of time. But, we've onboarded Fair Sharing a while back, but I wasn't part of the team that did the onboarding process, so I'm a little bit naive when it comes to how we can utilize the EOS platform. And I was really interested in the slide that you presented about all of the benefits that you gain from onboarding and things like the help desk usage and all of the other things. I didn't actually, I'm not aware of any of that, so that's probably partly my failing, but also I'm just wondering, is there somewhere I can go to find out all of these benefits with accounting and help desking and things that I just wasn't aware that Fair Sharing could participate in?
So we're working to better document those value propositions. That's actually something that's a task that I'm also involved in. So yes, we're working on it. There's not a particular place yet. So
it's
that
not
is
your fault.
Sorry?
It's ours, and sorry for that. We are working on it now.
Yeah. Okay, one last question, because we are very much over time, and I know everybody's desperate for cake.
Thank you. So far, there were providers and resources in the EOS platform marketplace. Now there's these new types of data sources, software. All these are being introduced. Will all of these require a provider?
For research products, there isn't a provider, quote unquote, that needs to be onboarded because there is an identification of who produced the asset, who produced the paper or the data set or something. So we do keep track of that, but they don't need to be onboarded as providers. Clearly that would mean millions of new providers, which we're not going to do. But if you're operating a service and providing that service to other researchers, yes, we do need a provider. And in fact, we want to see a fair amount of information about who is accountable for delivering that service. So yes. The same is true also for data sources, because that's a process. So there is a provider associated with data sources. Ditto for catalogs that we're bringing into the sort of the universe, the EOSC universe, and there is an identified catalog owner that we identify in that process. But for research products, in other words, software, and not running software, but code, data sets, publications, monographs, works of art, whatever the heck is going in there, that's kind of implicit in the actual record, and it's not something that we identify separately.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's about it. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your joining us and tolerating us being over time. So any other questions, feel free to ask them over coffee.